Sure. It's always a bit difficult to shift back into verbal. So I'm using a Muse EEG, and it's got 5 different sensors on it. Yep, come on up. And because it has 5 sensors, I'm able to do think left and think right to do crossfades between sound kits. So it reads alpha, beta, delta, gamma, and theta waves from my brain, and then transmits it Bluetooth to this app.
This is insane.
And then this app does all the MIDI translation. So it takes brain waves, and then I made a bunch of algorithms to make musical decisions. I love the looks on your faces.
So,
and then this is a MIDI cable straight into the octatrack.
What is the general price range of that piece of gear? If you don't mind me.
The EEG, it's like 200. You could get used for like 150, 175. Yeah, most of the hurdle is the programming. Yeah.
Can you describe some like the algorithms that you did, or like how you made the algorithm decisions in terms of the musical algorithms?
Sure.
To go from like what are you thinking and what does it do?
I've meditated since I was 19, and so I can move from different areas of my brain. So it wasn't, when I first got it, I thought, well, if I think the word 1 or the think word 2, will that be different on it? And it's not. It just, that spikes as verbal.
Interesting.
And so if I go to meditating, focusing on the music, clearing my brain, activating my brain, thinking words, moving or thinking about movement, which is identical in terms of brain response, or very similar. And that changes those 5 different waves in different configurations. And instead of mapping each wave directly to a parameter, I'm looking at it as if it's a family of relationships and detecting where different ones are in relation to the other, and using those relational values to compose with. And so as things move up and down or move around each other, I'm adding kicks, I'm adding sub-sounds, I'm adding the hi-hats, modulating the overall signal, the effects, the filters, the density.
So in this case too, it sounds like the algorithms were written for your style of, like the way that you meditate and your output that you're getting from what
Yes.
you're used to doing.
Other people can put it on and something will come out.
It's not.
I think the best metaphor for it is that, anyone can walk up to a drum kit, grab the sticks, and make sound.
Right.
And then if you're a really good drummer, you can get nuanced with it. And so each time I use the system, I learn more, and I can get more nuanced with it.
Right.
Yeah.
User interface. It still looks like magic. Like even
Yeah, I know.
you describing it, I'm like, oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, but it's
looks
like my
magic.
brain is wrapping around, but at the same time, it's like, my God. Like,
Yeah.
So it's like
really
your
mind-blowing.
meditation that like led you to the programming, like or what led you to like the programming aspect of that?
To start the project in general, or
Yeah,
specifically
like, to use like this
in
type of
EEG?
iOS programming, to like connect to your audio track.
I've done iOS programming for about 10 years, and I built a sequencer with an AI as an app previously. So I had a bunch of frameworks for MIDI. I had done a series of motion sensor work with dancers, so I already had a framework for Bluetooth connection. That's the reason I went with. Is that what your question was? Why did I go with iOS specifically?
Like what happened? Like
How did I start the project? Got it.
Creation,
What happened was December of 2017, I had a dream where the long version of it was I was working on some of these sounds that were a type of ethereal dubby techno. And in the dream, I was working on that in real life, but in the dream I had made a demo and I had taken it to this woman that was, she was a biologist and a New York Times reviewer in the dream. And so I went to her and I had given her the demo previously. And so I saw her, I was like, oh, what'd you think of my demo? And she said, well, it's really not remarkable, is it? And I was like, oh, okay. So I walked away defeated in the dream. And I thought, well, what could I do to make this music more interesting to this specific biologist, New York Times reviewer? And I thought in the dream, oh, what if I started making music based on DNA sequences? And I woke up and I was like, oh, that's an awesome idea. And I wrote it down. I Googled DNA, human DNA sequences, and I found a page on NIH. And right at the top of the screen, it said primary assembly. And it had all these sequences, and it looked like an Ableton MIDI channel. So I started grabbing those and using those. So the rhythms and the synthesizers you heard are those DNA sequences. So I was working on that for a period of time, and this idea of making music based on humans, human biology and human bodies.
Your live like feelings expressed. Like,
exactly. And then I was on Instagram and I saw an ad for a Muse EEG, and I looked at it and I thought, if I could use this EEG to compose this music that's based on DNA sequences, that would be the perfect match in terms of technology and concept. And I looked up the device. At the time they had an open SDK, and downloaded it, bought the device. I think the first one I bought was used, and so it was like $175, it wasn't much. Got it, grabbed my MIDI framework from my sequencer, iOS sequencer, grabbed the Bluetooth framework from my motion sensor, worked with the dancers, put together, put it on, ran a MIDI chord into, I think it was my modular setup. You know, it has the light up when MIDI goes in. And I remember thinking, and then looking at the light, and it went, and I was like, yes!
It's alive!
It's alive, exactly. That was my eureka moment, was being able to think something and trigger a note. And I knew if I could trigger one note, I could do a whole composition.
thank you.
That's how it started.
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
I mean, my mind is blown, man.
You're welcome.
How long
Yes.
How long have you been performing as Great?
The first show was in January.
And where else do you?
So far, this is my first New York performance, and didn't promote it much. I've been focusing mostly on a Friday show, so this is almost like a private gathering. So it's very special to me.
Yeah, it's amazing.
No, I used to live here, so I know the area well, but I moved away in 2009. I lived here for 9 years.
Where are you based?
I'm actually in Iowa this year.
Okay.
So I grew up there, and it's a good place for me to do this type of brain work, because it's quiet and I can focus. So the first performances were in Iowa, and I started getting art grants there to develop the system further. Kept doing that. And then last week I did a show at the Even Further Festival, which is this historic techno festival in the Midwest.
Just like 2050?
Yeah, I know. It's even my own work with this, it feels very sci-fi and
I mean,
surreal.
no, and that's what's the best thing about it. It's just, to me, it's just fucking mind-blowing.
Well, I'm happy to hear that. That's the goal. That's the goal.
You know? And honestly, like, everybody was sitting here, like, trying to figure out, like, what the fuck you were doing.
Yeah, I try to make my my subs and my kicks as emulate heartbeats.
Yeah.
Some of them are crisper, but and then the atmospheres to emulate the psyche.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I thought of with that, like, one of the last, like, kick-heavy sounds you played. It was, like, a very, like, a heartbeat.
Great.
So I was like, I was trying to figure out, like, is he making the fucking kick with this? Like, I didn't know if you were making the kick with your brain.
Yes, I was.
Which
So
is
I
fantastic.
I can insert
Yeah.
kick and sub notes and then remove them with thought.
What do you think that triggers, like, I don't know how to even ask this question.
Sure.
What is the thought that triggers the kick drum? Like,
So it's when I move. It's I have to raise my alpha to add kicks, and there's different meditation methods I can use to raise my alpha. One of the simple ones is actually to focus on the audio signal, and then I dive. So alpha is, best way to describe it is nonverbal, subconscious kind of diving into my mind. Whereas like waking back up and looking, sometimes I'll take a big breath in and open my eyes, and that moves me back into delta. So delta is more the conscious mind, and this is simplistic, but delta is the conscious mind, alpha is the subconscious. So I can add kicks by diving into.
Those are the brain waves, right? Those are the
Yes.
values that
Yep.
are like being broadcast live.
Yep. Yep.
It's like there's already
I can show you.
a kick drum pattern. Like
It's a one shot. It's
locked
just a
and
kick.
loaded, basically.
It's just a kick. So it's they're one shots that I put into a looping sequencer and then take out the looping sequencer. But
Okay,
where I
so-
put it in is on based on my brain.
Wait, so you think what beat the measure it is, or like?
It
has sensors.
it does have quantization in the mapping, so it's not going to land on like a 2.
Right. So
It'll
it's
land on like a 1 or a 5. Each there's a certain level of quantization, so it isn't total chaos.
Okay.
These are the brain waves. So the red is delta. That's that active conscious mind. It's slipped as I'm talking. Blue is let me get reconnected.
That is alpha. They're color coded, right?
Yep. So red is delta, blue is alpha, purple is theta, and the ones I use the most are those 3. Beta and gamma, those are the gray ones at the bottom. For electronic music, I don't use those as much. They don't seem to go up as much during electronic music. But I worked with an opera singer, and those were the highest because she was using her breath and her vocals. And so I believe beta and gamma have to do with breath and language.
So there's already there's like a drum loop or some kind of loop,
There's a drum kick.
and your thought basically like brings that more into the mix.
No, there's so there's a looping sequencer that's empty. There's no notes in it. It's just a looping sequencer, and then my brain inserts notes into that looping sequencer and pulls them out.
So one helps just see your app. Yeah, that sounds
Sure,
similar.
it's right here.
That sounds similar to your sequencer, the AI sequencer.
Yeah. It's similar to the AI sequencer, where
Once
you can
it's
add
been,
notes
like,
and it's
put
looping.
into the sequence, it stays in the sequence.
It plays for a period of time, then I can remove it.
This is nutty.
It's so.
Yeah,
It's,
it is.
it's like just using. Those
Do you have like a
state
TikTok or
control.
something?
I'm starting to do some lectures on them. I do have a YouTube channel that has all of that. I can definitely connect you to
I would
that.
love to like learn more about it.
Yeah, no, I've got, I don't know if this would be helpful. So that's the signal flow, but, so this one is how I make MIDI notes. So as the alpha and delta switch, see where's this kick, bass, and percussion? Based on the relationship between conscious and subconscious, it's like surfing. And so as I'm going up and down these waves, when I hit certain points, it can add a kick or go lower and it'll add us up. And then riding back up on these waves, I can add percussion. And then if I drop them all, I can remove them if I clear my mind.
Which happens during your set, right? There are moments where it pulls out for a second, and that's you clearing your mind.
Sometimes it depends on what pulls out. It's
It's like a filter.
yeah. Sometimes it can be 2 things. It's if I go really deep in alpha and it's real bassy and it clears out, or if it gets high and clears out, it's my delta is spiked up, and that just like so you just hear kind of a white noise left.
Right.
Yep, and then it dives back in. Does that help at all, or?
Kind of.
Sure.
I mean, it's like you're lecturing on a subject that no one's learned before. You
I know,
what I mean?
yeah.
It's like we're college.
And which it's my job to be able to explain it.
No, I mean, you're doing a great job. It's just a wild. It's so alien.
Sure. Yeah. So it's the best way I can describe it. It's like moving through a fluid, and as I go up and down on these waves, this app that I've created, when I cross certain thresholds, that's how it adds. So imagine my delta is diving down. If it hits a certain point, or goes up a certain point, it's going to add that percussion note. And as my alpha goes up, which is up, diving in, it'll add bass and kick notes. So it's this relationship between the two.
What's your?
And it's MIDI notes.
Do you have like a particular like flavor of meditation that you practice more than others, or like?
Sometimes as simple as counting, but I learned to meditate when I was 19 during an LSD trip, and that's a method that I can use. But counting is quite effective as well. Body scans, doing a type of activation where I move really forward into my forebrain, changes the output on the EEG. Just relaxing and going into my body, usually my alpha goes up. So it's all sorts of techniques, and I move from one technique to another to move to surf those waves, to move into different parts of my brain. Nope. I don't want to take up too much time. Any other questions?
I would just want to talk to you about some brain stuff.
Cool. Yeah, and we can chat afterwards. Awesome. Well, thank you.